So, you've been doing all the right things for your trauma healing, therapy, journaling, maybe even some weird breathing exercise that make you look like you're hyperventilating in your car. And yet, some days you still feel like absolute garbage and you're thinking, is any of this actually working? Here's the thing about healing from childhood trauma. It's not like healing from a paper cut where you can literally watch it get better day by day. It's more like trying to watch your grass grow. You stare at it all day and you see nothing. And then a week later, your grass is up to your knees and your neighbor's complaining that your lawn needs to be cut. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 signs that you're actually healing from childhood trauma, even when it feels like you're just spinning your wheels in therapy-scented mud. Because healing is happening even when your inner critic is screaming that you're broken beyond repair. Now, before we dive in, let me validate something for you. Healing from childhood trauma is hard as hell. It's nonlinear, and sometimes it feels like you're getting worse before you're getting better. That's because when you start healing, you're finally letting yourself feel all the stuff that you've been suppressing since you were little. It's like cleaning out a basement or a garage that has been packed with junk for 30 years. It looks way worse in the middle of the process than it did when you just kept that door shut. I know this journey intimately, both from my own healing path and from working with trauma survivors. The most common question I hear isn't specific techniques. It's, how do I know if this is even working? I promise by the end of this video, you will have 5 concrete ways to recognize your healing progress, even when it feels invisible. These signs aren't about some magical before and after transformation. They're about the subtle shifts that are happening beneath the surface that actually indicate profound change. More importantly, you're going to learn why these particular signs matter more than the obvious ones that most people look for. Because the real markers of healing aren't about feeling happy all the time. They're about developing a fundamentally different relationship with yourself and your experiences. But here's what makes recognizing these signs so challenging. Our trauma responses are designed to protect us by maintaining the status quo. Part of you actually resists acknowledging healing because change, even positive change, feels threatening to your protective systems. And that is why we need to look beyond how you feel in any given moment and examine the subtle shifts in how you're relating to yourself, your emotions, and your experiences. These shifts might seem small, but they represent the foundation of lasting transformation. Let's be real here. That coworker with the same dismissive tone as your mother is still going to make your eye twitch. That's not going away tomorrow. But here's the difference. Before healing, a trigger would completely hijack you. Your nervous system would go from 0 to the building is on fire in half of a second. You'd either explode, shut down, or smile through homicidal thoughts while your internal organs melted inside of you. Now, you might notice a tiny gap, maybe just a millisecond at first, between the trigger and your reaction. Maybe you still do get triggered, but you catch yourself thinking, oh, am I being triggered right now? That is awareness. That's the golden ticket, and that's healing. Or maybe you recover faster. Instead of an interaction ruining your entire week, maybe it only ruins a day, then eventually just a few hours, and then just a few minutes. Progress isn't about never getting triggered. It's about having a shorter emotional hangover afterwards, and that deserves celebration, even if it doesn't feel like enough yet. Sign number 2, you're setting boundaries and feeling guilty and still doing it anyways. If you grew up with childhood trauma, chances are setting boundaries feels about as natural as performing open heart surgery on yourself with a spork. Your default setting was probably set to whatever makes everyone else comfortable at the expense of my soul. So when you start saying things like, I can't take that on right now, or I'm not comfortable with that, or that ultimate boundary. No, without offering 17 explanations and an interpretive dance about why. That's massive healing. And here is the kicker. You probably still feel guilty. Your brain might be screaming that you're selfish, that you're hurting others, and that you don't deserve to have needs. The healing isn't in the absence of guilt, it's in doing it anyways. Every time you honor your own needs despite that guilt, you're literally rewiring neural pathways in your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that setting boundaries doesn't lead to abandonment or punishment. And eventually, I promise you, that guilt, it gets quieter. I want you to think of guilt as that annoying backseat driver who has been navigating your entire life. Nobody likes a backseat driver. You don't have to kick them out of the car just yet, but you do get to say, thanks for your input, but I'm following my own directions now. Sign number 3, you're noticing your patterns even if you can't stop them yet. There's this magical yet frustrating phase of healing where you develop what I call the internal witness. Suddenly, you can see yourself repeating the same relationship patterns, people-pleasing behaviors, or the self-sabotage tactics that has been running on autopilot your entire life. It's like watching yourself in a horror movie, internally screaming, "Don't go in that room," while your fucking body walks right into it. This awareness can actually feel worse at first. Before, you were operating unconsciously, and now you're conscious of your patterns, but maybe you don't have all the tools to change them just yet. So you end up thinking, great, I'm still messing up and I'm aware of it. This is so much better. But this awareness is actually a massive sign of healing. You can't change what you can't see. Noticing is always the first step. And gradually, that gap between noticing and being able to choose differently will grow. So if you've been beating yourself up for knowing better but doing it anyways, please stop. That knowing is healing. The doing differently will come with practice and self-compassion. Sign number 4, your inner dialogue is changing, even if it's just a little. If you grew up with childhood trauma, chances are your inner voice sounds suspiciously like the most critical parent, teacher, or whoever made you feel like you were never enough. That voice has probably been the background music of your life for so long you didn't even notice it. You know that voice, that one that says super helpful things like, "You're gonna mess this up like you always mess up everything," or "Nobody actually likes you," or "They were just being polite," or my personal favorite, "Everyone else figured out how to be a human properly except you." Healing doesn't mean that that voice disappears overnight, but you might notice subtle changes. Maybe you catch that voice and think, wow, that was harsh. I'm a bitch to myself. Or maybe you start questioning if those thoughts are actually true. Or maybe, and this is huge, you start talking back to that voice. Even the smallest moments of self-compassion, like telling yourself, it's okay, you're doing your best, instead of you're such an idiot when you make a mistake, those are signs that you're developing a healthy relationship with yourself. I want you to think of it like having a new roommate move in with your inner critic. I want you to think of it like having a new roommate move in with your inner critic. At first, the compassionate roommate might be pretty quiet, but eventually they start speaking up. And then one day, you might find out that they've taken over the lease entirely. What these signs reveal is something profound about trauma healing. It's not about eliminating your past or becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming the relationship with yourself that trauma interrupted. Each of these signs, the gap between the trigger and the response, the boundaries despite the guilt, the pattern recognition, the changing of the inner dialogue, they're all about the same thing. Your authentic self beginning to emerge from beneath the adaptations that once protected you. And this brings us to perhaps the most significant sign of all, one that ties everything together. Sign number 5, you feel your feelings without being completely overwhelmed by them. When you grow up with childhood trauma, feelings become dangerous. Either you weren't allowed to have them, or they were so intense they threatened to swallow you whole. So you develop some creative workarounds, numbing out, dissociating, intellectualizing, or my personal favorite, becoming an emotional support human for everyone else while pretending you don't have needs. Basically, you've become the emotional equivalent of those inflatable people outside of car dealerships, either flailing around wildly or completely deflated. There's no in between. A sign of healing is when you start to experience emotions as information rather than full-blown emergencies. You might notice the sadness in your body and think, I'm feeling sad right now, instead of either shutting it down completely or falling into a pit of despair. This is your nervous system learning that feelings are survivable, that they come and they go like weather patterns rather than permanent states of being. And most importantly, that you can feel something uncomfortable without immediately needing to fix it, numb it, or escape from it. So if you found yourself crying and thinking, I'm sad, instead of I'm broken, that's healing. If you felt angry without either exploding or imploding, that's healing. If you've allowed yourself to feel joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop, that's massive healing. Here is what I want you to take away from this today. Healing from childhood trauma isn't a before and after transformation. It's thousands of tiny shifts that happen beneath the surface before you ever see changes on the outside. These 5 signs, changing trigger responses, setting boundaries despite guilt, noticing patterns, evolving your inner dialogue, and feeling your feelings, they're all evidence that your nervous system is rewiring itself. They're proof that your authentic self is gradually reclaiming territory from your trauma responses. And the most frustrating part, the people around you might notice you're healing before you do. Because you're living in your own skin every day, it's really difficult to see the gradual changes. Like I said, it's like watching grass grow or like watching your hair grow. You don't see anything happening and then you need a haircut. So if you've been thinking, I've been doing this work forever and nothing's changing, I really invite you to look for those subtle signs. I want you to give yourself credit for the milliseconds of awareness, the boundaries set despite guilt, the patterns noticed, the moments of self-compassion, and the feelings felt. Let me share a transformation that illustrates these signs in action. One woman I was working with, whom I'll call Sarah, came to me after years of therapy, feeling like she wasn't making progress. She still got triggered by her mother's criticism, still struggled with people pleasing, and still had that really harsh self-talk. The thing is, when we looked closer, we discovered profound changes she hadn't acknowledged. That trigger from her mother, it used to derail her for weeks. Now she recovered in hours. Those boundaries she felt guilty about, she was setting them anyways. Her inner critic, it's now had a compassionate voice challenging it. Sarah hadn't noticed these changes because she was looking for the wrong evidence. She expected to feel consistently good, to never get triggered, to have perfect boundaries. But real healing isn't about reaching some perfect end state. It's about changing your relationship with your imperfect human experience. The moment Sarah recognized these subtle shifts as legitimate healing, something profound happened. She stopped waiting to be healed someday in the future and really started to acknowledge the healing that was already taking place. And that recognition itself accelerated her progress dramatically. But here's the truth. Healing happens in the dark, like seeds growing underground. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And one day you suddenly realize there are shoots breaking that soil, reaching for the sun. You are not broken. You are healing. And healing isn't linear. It's not pretty, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. But it is happening even when, especially when, it doesn't feel like it. If you've resonated with any of these signs, I'd love to hear which ones in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else recognize their own healing. And if you want more content about healing from childhood trauma, codependency, mother wounds, father wounds, all that fun stuff, subscribe and join our Truth Seekers community. We talk about the real, messy parts of healing here. No toxic positivity, no just think good thoughts, just authentic conversation about what healing actually looks like.